Straight back from Boyce. What a goal!
Well, they don't come much better than that. Right out of the book and on the first line too.
Long before VAR, long before players being wrapped up in cotton wool, people were literally fighting on the pitch.
A fight going off the ball between Hunter and Lee. Quite how much of that the referee saw, I'm not sure. And it looks to me as if it's broken out again. It's broken out again, and now this time a complete free-for-all.
Muddy pitches, pitch invasions, two-footed tackles, players hung over from drinking the night before. This, ladies and gents, is the crazy world of 70s football. And I'll be honest, I think most of us wouldn't have survived.
It was clear that the police had a potential riot on their hands.
Down here on the flank, the pitch incidentally 10 yards narrower than usual.
So ladies and gents, whilst everyone else seems to be getting all nostalgic about the 90s and the early 2000s, those youngsters talking about the Barclays era of the Premier League, here's me browsing YouTube, absolutely baffled, or absolutely in awe, should I say, of what I've seen watching 70s football. Now, most of us have come across that iconic fight between Franny Lee and Norman Hunter.
And it looks to me as if it's broken out again.
It literally took a full-on scrap to get a red card back in the 70s. But in this video, we're gonna look at some more crazy clips. I just wanna share with you what I've seen, because this was normality for our parents. I couldn't understand why, as a 90s kid, my parents would talk about the good old days being the 70s, and here we are now reminiscing about the 90s. We all think our era as a child was the best era. Maybe, just maybe, I was born in the wrong era, because here I find myself nostalgic about an era I never actually lived through.
McDonald, there it is! The winner, surely! Bobby Moncur!
One man, one and now Lorimer. Great chance for 4-2. Is it? It's yes, it's a goal. Put in by Harris. Still there, Greaves. 10 minutes of the match gone, and Jimmy Greaves has done it again. Scored on his debut for every club, for Chelsea, for Tottenham, for England. There are enough players up. Hurst, Greaves coming in. Number 2.
The decade of the 1970s, from a footballing perspective, was so much more though than fights. There was, as we said, muddy pitches, crazy haircuts, blokes who looked like they were 60 years old when in fact they were in their 20s. Let's start off with the obvious one, guys. Let's talk about the incredibly insane tackles that went on in the 1970s.
Cooper, and then beaten by, oh my goodness, by Jack Charlton, bringing it away. Cross in, it's a devastating one as well.
Yes, two-footed, studs up, and all it took was a stern word from the referee to keep law and order. In Britain, we used to have our parents say, just get on with it, and the referee was just as unsympathetic. He'd be like, get up. Now we know he's straight over there looking at the screen at VAR. So if it wasn't a dodgy tackle, as we said at the start, it could result in a full-on scrap. We've mentioned Franny Lee and Norman Hunter, but a year before, in 1974, in a Charity Shield game, it all kicked off between Kevin Keegan and Billy Bremner.
Kenzie, and now what? More trouble off the ball, and this is just what English football did not want to see. And he's off here, and he's absolutely livid about it. Bremner is off as well. They're both throwing their shirts down, and really this is a side of English football, a face of English football we do not want to see.
Both were banned for 11 games.
What's so 70s about this game was not only is it a Charity Shield game and it's supposed to essentially be a light-hearted warm-up game before the season kicks off. Back then, obviously, the Charity Shield could be shared between clubs in the event of a draw, but prior to Bremner and Keegan being sent off for that scuffle, Keegan was actually caught by a full-on right hook by Giles, who wasn't sent off for that. He was still on the pitch.
And that looked very much like a right hook by Johnny Giles. Keegan, the player, down, with the name certainly going into the book.
Obviously, we've only had VAR here in England for, 7 years now? But it wasn't just fighting that people got away with. You'll see goals that were blatantly offside.
Pass intercepted, but Sagan is offside. The referee waving him on. Brown is going straight through, taking on Sprake. And the goal by Aston, and Leeds will go mad. Leeds have every justification for going mad, although one must add that they played to the linesman and not to the whistle. But you can understand the feelings of these Leeds players. John Revie on the pitch. The linesman going to talk to the referee. John Revie, a sickened man. Look at him looking up to the heavens in disgust. So many fans on the field being taken off and more police on than players.
You'll see blatant handballs long before the iconic Hand of God by Diego Maradona.
Against Russell Osman, it's a good cross, and it's a nice touch by Greenoff.
It's a good one too. That was handball on the blind side. It was handball on the line. Wood, surely. Gotta be. But the first handball has not been seen.
It was lawless. If the referee didn't see it, it didn't happen. Now, of course, nostalgia is heavily linked to us as football fans. We always compare the current product with the good old days, and we often long for the days of terracing in top-flight English football. Of course, I've spent the last couple of years travelling Germany, and they've still got the standing terraces. But in the 70s, they were a little less organised. The terraces were an absolute free-for-all, and we know that ultimately ended in disaster with Hillsborough in 1989, but we were a long way off that in the 1970s. Some people loved the terraces for the adrenaline rush when a goal scored and everyone piled forward towards the pitch. My parents often talk about when you'd get away fans in the home sections. They'd try and take over a section of the home end. They would stay hidden. Of course, this is long before people buying tickets online. You could rock up on the day, pay cash in hand. So anybody was getting into football grounds, and often, well, more often than not, your eyes would drift away from the pitch and onto a scrap that was erupting at the other side of the ground.
Referee Q had only one option, and he took both sides off the pitch while order was restored. It was 8 minutes before the game was able to restart.
Obviously, the 1970s were a time long before commercialisation took over the sport. This was still a working class man sport, and I'm not being sexist, but many women feared being in those terraces. It very much didn't attract the family-friendly viewer that it has today. No prawn sandwich brigade, only the hardcore that loved to rough it in the terraces. Of course, there were seating sections, but it was very much standing when it came to English football. Football was a lot more raw, football was a lot more pure, but it was still very much in the hands of the fans. Maybe a little bit too much, because more often than not, the fans would spill over onto the bloody pitch. Now, you might be able to see floodlights in the distance. I'm fairly close to the home of Cheltenham Town Football Club. This is Wadden Road. Although I've lived here 13 years, if you're a subscriber, you'll know I'm originally from Hereford, and my dad has been following Hereford for decades. He was one of those kids running onto the pitch in a parka when Ronnie Radford scored the iconic FA Cup goal.
Billy Meadows, the Hereford centre-forward, cost exactly £300, and Malcolm MacDonald, the Newcastle centre-forward, cost £180,000. There are 15,000 people in this ground. It's packed to capacity, a lot of people without tickets, and that's just one of them. MacDonald coming in, that's it. Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal! Radford the scorer, Ronnie Radford. And the crowd are invading the pitch. Oh, he's got it! Ricky George! Ricky George has done it! What a moment for Hereford!
Now, you might watch those clips, those iconic moments, and just think people pitch invaded for once-in-a-lifetime moments, like Hereford knocking Newcastle out of the FA Cup. But it was a common thing. Just watch old goals being scored. There's fans jumping over the fences, onto the pitch, celebrating with the players. It was a common thing. No lifetime ban from football grounds. It wasn't over-policed. They would get you off the pitch, don't get me wrong, but you'd be back in the terraces, no problemo. Now, we've spoken about fans misbehaving, But what about the bloody players? These weren't athletes. The 70s, as we said, included some questionable hairstyles, some questionable physiques. Maybe not Kevin Keegan if you saw that clip, but these weren't exactly the fine-tuned athletes we see today. They weren't eating a healthy diet. They weren't drinking lots of water and juice and all those good things. They were drinking pints. They were eating what they wanted. And one name comes to mind, Georgie Best, of course. You might link him more to the 60s, but Bestie was still playing. These were characters. A lot of these former 70s players would go on to be pundits with like Sky Sports and stuff. They all had a personality. Now, I'm sure there are personalities. We know Jack Grealish, he seems like a laugh, but they're very much robots when they speak to the media. These players were accessible. They were normal people. They weren't megastars like they are today. There weren't agents protecting fans from getting close to them. They weren't multimillionaires. The players were just like you and I. And I guess that comes as a result of the commercialisation of the sport, which would later follow in the next couple of decades.
A good goal? One of your best?
I'm happy with it.
Missing the target from there, you want bloody shooting!
For me, when I think 70s football, I don't necessarily think of Franny Lee and Norman Hunter having a scrap. I think of those muddy pitches, no matter what clip you watch.
That ball knocked back in, and Hector found himself played onside. It was an easy job to beat Shilton then. Roger Davis. Davis with Hinton to his left, trying to get on the end of this. And he did too. Rioch!
Of course, they were still questionable in the 80s, but they definitely started to improve as time went on. And again, the quality of the game, we speak again about all the good things, but obviously the pitch improving led to a faster paced product. Back then, you couldn't play it around on the floor. I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing. We see teams unnecessarily passing it around the defence, playing out from the back and all those incredibly tedious things. But it was hoof it up there, lump it up there to the big man up top. So the quality, I say that though, I say the quality wasn't as good, but just watch some of these clips. There was definitely some beautiful goals scored in the 1970s.
Oh, what a goal by Mallory! Turning McClintock nicely. Then Leach. Fights right. Oh, well, what about that?
You're into Perrin. And the defenders deciding to come up and join in an attack. Law to Morgan. Law. And a goal! Down that right wing. Good 1-2. And a good shot. And what a goal! What a goal!
I think when people talk about the all-time greats, especially now in the social media era, obviously everyone wants to talk about these days Messi or Ronaldo, even though they're coming to their twilight years. But for me, you can't beat the players like Georgie Best, who are being hacked down by no-nonsense defenders like Chopper Harris. Those guys, some of them, I think, were born too early. Glenn Hoddle just making a start. Some of these really technically gifted players, Kevin Keegan we've already mentioned, Kenny Dalglish, these players who could play with the ball, dribble despite those messy pitches. Now you see players skying a shot from like 20 yards out on essentially a bowling green. Those players in the 70s, it was no nonsense. They were fearless. Have things improved in football? Of course, lots of things have improved, as we've mentioned. But is the product better now, 50 years on? I'll leave that to you in the comments below. I definitely feel VAR massively killed the game in top flight English football in the Premier League, because even in the 2000s, even in the decade afterwards, football was still fairly fast-paced. Yes, your team often conceded a goal that might have been offside. Maybe there was a cheeky handball. There were controversies, but at least it was honest. At least the fans got to see, got to celebrate at the time of a goal. We say the game's got soft, but players today would have had to adapt it. They would have changed. They wouldn't have been the rolling on the floor prima donnas they are, because that's the environment they're in. We're all a product of our environment. If you like this video, guys, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and remember, we're ticking off all 92 clubs in the English Football League. We're already 2 episodes in, episode 1 here at my hometown of Cheltenham, then we're at Oldham. Make sure you do check out episode 3 for my rankings, my ratings from the Oldham video, and episode 3 is going to be in Middlesbrough against Millwall. So speaking of fighting, speaking of scrapping, who knows what'll happen? Hopefully not. I'm not glorifying scrapping. Thanks for watching. See you soon.